There's a human rights and humanitarian crisis in Gaza as we speak, and one of the key things is that Israeli attacks on Gaza since the current conflict started on the 27th of December last year have in many cases been disproportionate, and because of that hundreds of unarmed civilians have been killed. In some cases the attacks have been deliberately against, or appear to be deliberately against, civilians and civilian buildings. What's more, there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and in many cases this means that people have nowhere to go, they've got nowhere to seek shelter, the borders are closed, food stocks are running thin, and medical supplies are an urgent, there's urgent need for medical supplies. Hospitals lack basic necessities. Then on the other side, Palestinian armed groups have been firing indiscriminate rockets at Israeli population centres in southern Israel, and that's led to at least 3 people being killed. Amnesty International has got a delegation on the ground in southern Israel at the moment. We don't have access to Gaza. We've asked the Israeli authorities for permission to enter. We haven't been given this. And we're in the same position as many other organisations, human rights, humanitarian organisations, and of course journalists. And that's a serious problem for people for independent reporting on the ground. And we're asking for immediate and unfettered access for all of those. What the picture nonetheless that's coming out, and we're in constant contact with people on the ground in Gaza, is of a calamitous situation. And that's, first of all, there are over 850 people in Gaza have been killed so far in the current conflict. Nearly half of those are civilians, and many of those are women and children. Now, in addition, there's a terrible problem with food supplies, and to give one example, there are something like, during the 3-hour lull, which is often broken in any case in the days of fighting, there are sometimes queues of 300 metres for bread. And often people at the back of the queue never get to the front to actually buy the bread they need because the fighting started by the time they get there. The situation in the hospitals is grim, to say the least. Medical supplies aren't getting there, and what's clear is that with the electricity supply so problematic, and generators needed, there isn't enough electricity to actually power the apparatus, the machines that are needed to keep people alive, and as a result people are dying. Situation that we've been following on the ground in southern Israel is where 3 civilians have been killed by rocket fire fired from Gaza, and but at least some 200 have been injured in those rocket attacks as well. Another aspect of all of that is that many people have left their homes. And just to take one town, Ashkelon, where our delegation has visited, it seems that some 40% of the town has left temporarily, which is obviously a massive amount. Israel, Hamas and other Palestinian groups should immediately cease all attacks against civilians. They need to cease all disproportionate attacks which harm civilians. And they need basically to abide by their obligations under international law. Amnesty believes that there is mounting evidence that both Israel and Palestinian groups have committed war crimes. Mounting evidence. Now on the Israeli side, there have been a number of attacks which have taken place which appear to show signs of possible war crimes. And if you take just 3. One was the incident where the Israeli forces evacuated some 110 Palestinians into a house and then 24 hours later repeatedly shelled it, and 30 people died as a result. Another incident is where the Israeli forces targeted, it appears, a centre where there were civilian police who were not taking part of the hostilities. That's another example. And thirdly, the case in which the Israelis deliberately, it appears, targeted the parliament in Gaza. That's for us a civilian building, and should not have been targeted under international law. On the Palestinian side, Palestinian armed groups have fired indiscriminate rockets at Israeli towns and cities in the south of the country, and those appear to have been directed deliberately at Israeli population centres. Well, first of all, the UN Security Council has issued a resolution calling for a ceasefire. It's also called for unfettered humanitarian assistance to be getting into Gaza. Now, at the moment, that call is going unheeded. Now, if it does continue to go unheeded, then what we're calling for is at least a humanitarian truce by all sides, which will allow humanitarian aid to get in, humanitarian aid that is so needed in Gaza because of the situation there, because of the crisis on the ground. There is at the moment a 3-hour lull, which is often broken in any case on an almost daily basis, but that is just simply not enough for people who are trapped in Gaza to get the assistance that they need. The international community needs to start taking steps already to address the longer term issues, and two of those issues are accountability and human rights monitors. First of all, there is mounting evidence of war crimes having been committed, and it is essential that the international community ensures that a mechanism investigates those, that there's an independent and impartial investigation into those crimes, or into the evidence of those crimes, and that those who are responsible are held accountable. Secondly, there need to be monitors on the ground, and the international community needs to work towards a situation where there are monitors who are able to monitor what crimes are being committed on the ground, to monitor abuses of human rights and humanitarian law, and ensure therefore that the people, both in southern Israel and in Gaza, are protected in the future. Well, Amnesty International is calling for an arms embargo. We believe that a comprehensive arms embargo should be imposed on all parties to the conflict, that's the Israelis, the Hamas and other Palestinian groups, until such time as it becomes clear that those parties are not using weapons to commit abuses of international humanitarian law.